Controversial TV provocateur attempted to diminish a self-made business titan on live television, but she hadn't foreseen that his measured riposte would ignite a national uprising. The studio buzzed with palpable anticipation as cameras captured every electrifying moment in the bustling set. Today's guest was far from ordinary. Malcolm Daniels, a 39-year-old visionary from Oakland, California, who had transformed his humble tech startup into a billion-dollar empire. His journey was the quintessential rags-to-riches saga, a neighborhood kid defying all odds to become one of the most esteemed names in the industry. Across the nation, viewers tuned in with eager hearts, yearning to witness his extraordinary rise. Yet, the host, Diane Strickland, harbored an entirely different agenda. A seasoned architect of controversy, her razor-sharp tongue and polarizing opinions had etched her into every living room, thriving on moments that left audiences gasping and ratings soaring. Critics decried her as manipulative, even prejudiced, but her loyal fans admired her unfiltered candor, regardless of its divisiveness. For Diane, this interview was not meant to honor Malcolm's success. It was a calculated opportunity to dismantle the glossy narrative that had so captivated many. The stage was impeccably set, and the stakes soared to unprecedented heights. Malcolm entered in a crisply tailored navy suit, settling gracefully into his seat opposite Diane beneath the glaring studio spotlights. His calm confidence radiated through his warm smile and poised posture, exuding modest grace rather than conceit. Diane leaned forward, her pen drumming a rhythmic cadence on her clipboard. Though the atmosphere remained ostensibly courteous, an undercurrent of tension simmered, like the stillness before a storm. "Welcome to the show, Malcolm," she intoned in a tone both light and subtly biting. "You've been stirring quite the commotion lately. Everyone's buzzing about your tech revolution, but tell me, do you really believe that your story is painted a bit too flawlessly?" Her question hung in the charged air. Unflinching, Malcolm offered a gentle smile, tilting his head as though weighing her challenge with quiet deliberation. "Well, Diane," he replied in a smooth, measured cadence, "it's less about a picture of perfection and more about the relentless pursuit of perseverance. My journey has been anything but easy, yet I firmly believe that hard work and resilience always shine through." The audience erupted into rapt applause, but Diane's expression remained inscrutable, merely a prelude to what was coming. Unbeknownst to Malcolm, Diane cared little for his narrative of endurance. She was primed to confront every pillar of his identity, setting the scene for a showdown that would be seared into memory. As the clapping subsided, Diane reclined in her chair, her impeccably manicured nails tapping the edge of her clipboard. She offered Malcolm a tight, controlled smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Perseverance, she drawled with a trace of skepticism. "But let's be honest, Malcolm, it isn't every day that someone from your background finds themselves in this very seat. Surely, there's more to your tale than just relentless hard work, don't you think?" Malcolm's smile never wavered, though a subtle glimmer, whether irritation or wry amusement, flickered in his eyes before he composed himself. "You're absolutely right," he said coolly. "There's always another layer to every story. But may I ask, what exactly are you insinuating?" Diane chuckled, crossing her legs as if bracing for a prolonged debate. "Oh, I'm not insinuating anything," she replied with contrived innocence dripping from her tone. "I'm merely noting that in an industry dominated by, let's say, a certain demographic, your meteoric rise is nothing short of extraordinary, almost, dare I say, improbable." A subtle shift rippled through the room as a soft murmur spread among the audience. Malcolm paused, his hands resting loosely on his lap, before continuing. "It is extraordinary," he conceded evenly, "and I never take it for granted. But improbable? Not at all. I see it as a testament to what happens when opportunity meets preparation and unwavering effort." Diane raised an eyebrow, visibly unimpressed by his response. "Preparation and effort," she repeated almost scoffing. "Do you honestly believe that captures the whole picture? Or might you admit that certain initiatives, affirmative action, for instance, provided you with an extra push?" A collective gasp and scattered whispers broke the silence. Though Malcolm's face remained calm, the sharp intakes of breath from some audience members underscored the tension thickening the room. Diane's remark had undeniably crossed a line, yet her nonchalant delivery only amplified its sting. Drawing in a slow, measured breath, Malcolm felt the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy shroud. He sensed the unyielding gaze of the audience, the camera crew, and millions watching at home, all waiting to see how he would respond. "I appreciate you stirring the pot, Diane," he began, his voice as composed as ever, "for it gives me a chance to address a common misconception about success, particularly in my own case. But before I answer, let me ask, would you pose the same question to someone who doesn't look like me? The room fell silent. For the first time, Diane's smile faltered, a flash of unease crossing her features before she quickly recovered. Well, Malcolm, I ask tough questions of all my guests, she retorted defensively. It's simply part of my job. Yet the crack in her armor was unmistakable. Malcolm was not about to let the moment slip away, he was only just warming up. The audience leaned forward, the tension almost tangible in the charged atmosphere. Adjusting his posture slightly to close the gap between them, he continued, I understand your role demands tough questions, but when you frame my success as improbable or imply that external factors rather than my own work ethic are responsible for my achievements, it compels me to ask, would you cast the same doubts on someone else's accomplishments under identical assumptions? Diane opened her mouth to retort, but Malcolm's words cut through the air like a sharpened blade. Listen, Diane, I've been in rooms where people assumed I didn't belong. I've had to prove myself 10 times over just to earn half the recognition, and even then, there was always someone quick to attribute my achievements to anything but my capabilities. I've heard that story before, and it's utterly exhausting. The murmurs in the audience grew louder. A woman in the front row crossed her arms, clearly displeased with Diane's line of questioning. Malcolm cast a brief glance toward the crowd before returning his focus to Diane. Now, don't get me wrong, he said, his voice softening ever so slightly, I'm not saying that programs like affirmative action haven't helped level the playing field, they're undeniably important. But to suggest that I'm here solely because of a handout that erases years of hard work and sacrifice is, quite frankly, insulting. Diane's face hardened, her meticulously polished facade momentarily cracking. I'm not erasing anything, she snapped, her voice now edged with severity. I'm merely highlighting the reality of how certain opportunities are bestowed. Would you really deny that your background, your entire story, has played a role in the media's fascination with you? Malcolm paused, a small, knowing smile flickering on his lips. Of course my story matters, he nodded subtly. But it's a story of resilience, not favoritism. People resonate with it because it reflects a truth they recognize in their own lives, that despite any obstacles, success is achievable if you refuse to give up. Diane crossed her arms, clearly unsettled by the direction the conversation had taken, her eyes darting to her clipboard in search of a way to reclaim control. But before she could speak, Malcolm leaned back and continued, his voice imbued with undeniable authority, and let's not pretend that this conversation is solely about me, Diane. He pressed on, when we question the legitimacy of someone's success based solely on their background, we send a message to millions who look like me, that their dreams aren't valid, that no matter how hard they work, it will never be enough. Is that truly the message we wish to convey? A fresh wave of applause cascaded through the audience, louder and more sustained this time. Diane's lips tightened into a thin line, though she managed a strained smile. Well, Malcolm, she said in a clipped tone, you certainly have a knack for making your point. Yet Malcolm was far from finished, the fire in his words had only just been kindled, and everyone sensed that the best was yet to come. As the applause subsided, the room's energy remained electric. Diane straightened in her chair, clutching her clipboard tighter as if bracing herself, while Malcolm appeared entirely at ease. His voice, calm yet resonant with quiet power, declared, you know, Diane, I wasn't always this composed. In my youth, I used to burn with anger when people doubted me, when teachers urged me to aim lower because they didn't believe I could achieve more, when I walked into boardrooms only to be assumed there to fetch coffee instead of closing deals. Such treatment leaves its mark. The audience listened with rapt attention, the air thick with anticipation. Gathering momentum, Malcolm continued, I learned something along the way. People's biases, whether they acknowledge them or not, reveal more about themselves than about me. I resolved that, no matter how many barriers were thrown in my path, I would never let anyone else define my worth. That's precisely why I stand here today. Diane shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly disturbed by the turn the conversation had taken. That's a compelling story, Malcolm, she remarked, attempting to regain control, but don't you think the anger you mentioned might, in some cases, prove counterproductive? Malcolm's eyes narrowed slightly, though his smile persisted. Anger can indeed be destructive if you allow it to consume you, he agreed, but it can also serve as fuel. It kept me moving when people said I couldn't, driving me to push harder, learn faster, and work longer than anyone else in the room. But here's the thing, Diane, it's not solely about my journey, it's about breaking the cycle for the next generation. Leaning forward, his voice softened to draw everyone in, he added, I now mentor young entrepreneurs, many from communities much like the one I grew up in, and you know what I tell them? I urge them to expect challenges, to anticipate doubt, but never to let anyone's opinion of their potential restrict their vision. Ultimately, only you decide how far you will go. The audience broke into thunderous applause, with some even rising to their feet. Diane appeared momentarily stunned, yet Malcolm pressed on. And if I may add one more thing, he said, his voice rising above the clamor, the real issue isn't just individual bias, it's the very systems we live within that perpetuate inequality. That's why I invest in education programs, scholarships, and community initiatives, because success should not depend on being an exception, it should be attainable for everyone willing to work for it. Diane's expression turned inscrutable, her usual sharpness softened by the weight of Malcolm's words. Well, Malcolm, she finally uttered after a long pause, it seems you've given us plenty to ponder. Yet, the true conversation was only beginning outside the studio, where Malcolm's words would spark a movement far beyond this one interview. The exchange concluded with a polite handshake and a strained smile from Diane, but the audience's roaring applause spoke louder than any closing remarks. Malcolm departed the stage with his head held high, unaware of the impending firestorm his words would soon ignite. By the time he reached his car, snippets of the exchange were already swirling online, shared by members of the live audience who couldn't wait to broadcast what they had witnessed. The first clip, a shaky phone recording capturing Malcolm's composed response to Diane's thinly veiled accusations, rapidly gained traction on social media within minutes. Titled Malcolm Daniels Schools Diane Strickland in the Most Elegant Manner, one caption, accompanied by hashtags like #RespectMalcolm and #BiasExposed, captured the essence of the moment. By day's end, the clip had amassed over 1 million views, and its momentum showed no sign of slowing. Major news outlets quickly picked up the story, framing it as a cultural watershed that exposed not only Diane's biases but also the broader issue of how society perceives success stories from marginalized communities. Panels, podcasts, and online forums buzzed with debates. Some lauded Malcolm for his grace under pressure, hailing him as a role model for handling prejudice with dignity, while others dissected Diane's words, questioning whether her approach was deliberately malicious or simply ignorant. Malcolm's phone overflowed with messages. Old friends, colleagues, even strangers reached out to thank him for speaking up. You voiced what so many of us have felt for years, one message read. Another said, I showed that clip to my kids, you've inspired them never to stop believing in themselves. Meanwhile, Diane found herself on the defensive, her name trending for days with hashtags like #HadDianeStricklandExposed, painting her as a symbol of outdated, discriminatory thinking. She later released a carefully worded statement claiming her questions had been taken out of context and that she harbored no ill intent, but the damage was done, public opinion had shifted, and her once pristine image was irreparably tarnished. For Malcolm, however, the moment transcended a viral clip. He harnessed the newfound attention to amplify his message, appearing on various platforms to discuss systemic barriers and the vital importance of mentorship. He announced a new initiative aimed at supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs, funded entirely by donations that poured in after the interview. This isn't just about me, he told one reporter. It's about creating opportunities for the next generation. The ripple effects were undeniable. Stories began emerging of young professionals taking bold risks in their careers, community leaders launching programs to nurture local talent, and students, for the first time, seeing their own reflections in his narrative. Yet beyond the headlines and hashtags, Malcolm's words continued to resonate deeply with those who heard them, challenging each listener to rethink their assumptions about success and resilience. Weeks after the interview, the buzz around his powerful message persisted. News outlets repeatedly cited the moment as a cultural turning point, and social media overflowed with posts celebrating his poise and integrity. For Malcolm, though, the true impact lay not in the clamor of the headlines, but in the personal messages from people whose perspectives had been forever altered by his story. One letter in particular stood out, a note from a high school senior named Jordan who had struggled to find motivation after facing repeated rejections from college applications. When I saw you on stage, speaking with such unwavering confidence, it felt as though you were addressing me directly, the letter read. You reminded me that my worth isn't measured by what others think, and because of you, I'm determined to keep striving. Malcolm carefully folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer. It wasn't the only one he'd received, dozens lay in wait, each a testament to the very reason he had persevered. He had always wanted his success to mean more than personal accolades, and now it was clear that his journey had become a beacon of inspiration for countless others. As for Diane, her show continued, but its ratings steadily declined. The controversy surrounding the interview had permanently altered her image, with many viewers feeling that she had failed to take accountability for her remarks, even as she remained publicly unapologetic. Insiders hinted at growing tensions behind the scenes. Her once sharp commentary had now become a cautionary tale of how bias and arrogance can overshadow genuine dialogue. Malcolm, however, remained focused on the future. His initiative for underrepresented entrepreneurs took off, providing resources, mentorship, and funding to hundreds of aspiring business owners. He traveled across the country, speaking at schools, community centers, and conferences, sharing not only his success story but also the invaluable lessons learned along the way. In one such speech, standing before a packed auditorium in Dallas, Texas, he addressed the crowd with the same calm confidence he had shown on Diane's show. "The greatest challenge isn't proving others wrong," he declared, "it's proving to yourself that you are right. The world will always have those who doubt you, those who try to diminish your worth, but their words do not define your journey, you do." The audience erupted into applause, yet Malcolm's expression remained humble. He knew that for every person clapping, countless others were still grappling with the barriers he had once overcome. His work was far from done, but he was ready for the challenge. Because in the end, Malcolm's story wasn't just about one man's ascent, it was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of representation, and the belief that no matter where you come from, your potential is limitless. If Malcolm's journey resonates with you, take a moment to reflect on the power of your own story. Whether you're overcoming obstacles or championing someone else's dreams, your actions can truly make a difference. Let your narrative be known, for in every shared moment lies the capacity to reshape our world.